When I saw my son's body covered in tubes and wires, I thought my heart had already broken. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing he wasn't supposed to survive. Someone wanted him gone. That was the moment I knew I had to take back control. My name is Joanna Rivers, and I've been many things in my life. An art teacher, a wife, a widow, and most importantly, a mother. But that night, none of those titles mattered. All I could think about was my boy, Ethan, lying somewhere between this world and the next. Before I tell you what happened, I want to ask, where are you watching from tonight? I always find comfort knowing there are people out there, listening, breathing, maybe even praying alongside me, because what I'm about to share still feels like a nightmare I haven't fully woken from. It started on a Tuesday. I was closing my classroom, cleaning paintbrushes, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something, that quiet mother's intuition that never lies, made me answer. "Mrs. Rivers?" A male voice, calm, rehearsed. "This is Memorial Hospital. Your son, Ethan Rivers, has been in an accident. He's in the ICU. You should come immediately." My knees nearly buckled. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the desk. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and rain. My fingers shook on the steering wheel. Every mile felt like an eternity. The sound of my own heartbeat drowned out the radio, the traffic, everything. I kept replaying our last conversation in my head, 2 days ago. He'd been upset. Something about his father. Money. "Mom, don't worry about it," he'd said. "I'll handle it." If I had known that would be the last time I'd hear his voice, I would have begged him to tell me everything. When I arrived, the lobby was too bright, the kind of sterile light that makes everything feel colder. Nurses rushed by with clipboards and stretchers. The smell of antiseptic hit me like a wall. I stumbled to the reception desk. "My son, Ethan Rivers," I was told. Before I could finish, a young nurse looked up. Her badge read Lydia. She froze when she heard the name. Her expression shifted from professional calm to something else. "Fear?" "Follow me," she said quietly. She led me down a corridor that hummed with fluorescent light. My heart pounded louder with each step. We stopped outside a room labeled ICU 12. I reached for the door handle, desperate to see my boy. But Lydia's hand shot out and gripped my wrist. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Hide, behind that door." "What?" I pulled back, startled. "Please," she whispered urgently, eyes darting down the hall. "Just trust me. Don't go in yet." There was something in her tone, trembling but certain. My body reacted before my brain could argue. I ducked into the empty adjoining room and pressed myself behind the half-closed door, my heart hammering so loud I was sure it could be heard. The air was heavy. I could hear the rhythmic beeping from Ethan's monitor in the next room, a fragile sound, like a heartbeat on borrowed time. Footsteps, slow, confident. A man's silhouette passed the narrow crack of the door and entered Ethan's room. "Vitals stable?" His voice was low, smooth, too calm for a man visiting a dying patient. "Yes, sir," another voice answered faintly. Then came the words that froze my blood. "The job's done, right? No loose ends?" My breath hitched. I knew that voice. I'd know it anywhere. Daniel, my ex-husband, Ethan's father. I bit down on my lip to stop myself from gasping. Every instinct screamed at me to burst in there, to protect my son. But I couldn't move. Not yet. Daniel's voice lowered, but I caught fragments. This time, make sure the report says internal bleeding. She'll never question it. She. He meant me. I clutched the doorframe until my knuckles went white. My mind couldn't reconcile it. The man I once trusted with my life standing over our son, arranging his death like a business transaction. Then came the sound of a zipper, the shuffle of papers and footsteps leaving. I waited until silence filled the corridor again. Then Lydia's head appeared through the crack. Her face was pale. "Now," she whispered, You can see him." I stepped inside, my knees weak. Ethan lay motionless, pale under the harsh lights. Machines beeped softly beside him. I brushed his hair back and whispered, "Mom's here, baby." And as I looked at his still face, one thought pulsed through my mind. This wasn't an accident. This was a warning. For a long moment, I just stood there, frozen beside Ethan's bed, listening to the slow, uneven rhythm of the monitor. Each beep was proof he was still alive, but barely. His face was pale, lips cracked, a bruise along his temple. My boy. My beautiful, stubborn, big-hearted boy. I wanted to scream, to rip every cord out and take him home. But Lydia's hand rested gently on my shoulder, grounding me. "Please, Mrs. Rivers," she whispered, eyes darting toward the door. "You can't let anyone know you heard him." Her voice trembled, but there was conviction in it. I turned toward her, my throat burning. "You heard what he said?" She nodded. "I did, and it's not the first thing I've noticed. That doesn't make sense." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Lydia looked over her shoulder before continuing. "Your son's file, his vitals, his test results, they've been changed, and the doctor in charge, Dr. Hale, he doesn't want anyone asking questions." I blinked hard, trying to steady my breathing. "Changed how?" She hesitated. "His blood test results. They were entered under the wrong patient ID number, then re-entered with different values. It's like someone wanted to make his condition look hopeless." Hopeless. The word stabbed through me. For a moment, the room tilted. I gripped the metal railing beside Ethan's bed and forced my body to stay upright. I whispered, "Why would anyone do that?" Lydia's jaw tightened. "I don't know. But the man who came in just now, he's not on staff." I checked. I stared at her. "That's my ex-husband." Her eyes widened slightly, as if that confirmed something she already feared. "I think you need to be careful, Mrs. Rivers," she said, "if you want to help your son. You can't trust the system right now." I looked down at Ethan's hand, limp in mine. The last time I saw him healthy was a week ago. He had come by to fix my porch light, laughing, smelling of engine oil and aftershave. "You still baby that old car?" I'd teased. "Always," he'd said, grinning. "It's the only thing Dad ever gave me that didn't break down." Ironic, isn't it? That the same man who gave him that car might be the one who used it to destroy him. I whispered a silent prayer, my lips barely moving. "God, please don't let me lose him." When I turned back, Lydia was gone. I rushed into the hallway, my pulse pounding. I spotted her at the nurse's station, handing off a clipboard, pretending to look busy. "Meet me in the supply room," she mouthed. 5 minutes later, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant, she spoke quickly. "Your son's sedation level was increased twice tonight. It's not standard protocol. I think someone's trying to keep him under longer than necessary." Her words made my stomach twist. "Are you saying someone wants him to die here?" "I'm saying someone doesn't want him to wake up." The world seemed to slow. Every sound grew sharp, the dripping of an IV, the echo of a distant intercom. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, my voice small. She hesitated, eyes glistening. "Because I've seen this kind of thing before. People with money and power can make a file disappear, can make a life vanish with a few clicks, but I can't stand by and let it happen again." Her sincerity hit me like a wave. I reached for her hand. "Then help me find out what they're hiding." She nodded. "I'll do what I can, but you need to keep quiet. No one else can know you're suspicious. Not yet." I stepped closer. "Lydia, if anything happens to me, promise me you'll protect him." Her expression softened. "I will, but right now you need to go home and rest. They'll get suspicious if you linger too long." Rest, as if I could. I walked back to Ethan's room, memorizing every inch of his face. Before I left, I pressed my lips to his forehead. "You hang on, baby. Mom's not done fighting." When I reached the exit, I saw Daniel's reflection in the glass door. standing outside, speaking to someone on his phone, his expression cold and deliberate. Our eyes met for just a second through the reflection. He smiled. That same calculated smile I once thought meant love. And in that moment, I realized the man I'd built a family with was now a stranger, and maybe the most dangerous one I'd ever meet. Sleep didn't come that night. I sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, clutching the same phone I once used to call Ethan every Sunday night, the one that would ring and ring, until I heard his bright, teasing voice, "Mom, relax, I'm fine." Now, silence. Only the echo of hospital machines and my own heartbeat filling the hours. By dawn, I made a decision. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was going to the hospital again, and this time I wasn't leaving until I knew the truth. When I arrived, the morning staff was changing shifts. Lydia looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed red, but when she saw me, her face softened. She pulled me aside, her voice low. "Mrs. Rivers, I shouldn't be saying this, but I think I found something." My chest tightened. "What is it?" She handed me a folded piece of paper, a copy of Ethan's blood test results. "Compare this with the one they'll show you in the chart," she whispered. "The numbers don't match." I frowned. "How did you even get this?" She hesitated. "I made a backup before they replaced it in the system. Just don't tell anyone it came from me." Her words sank like stones in my gut. A few minutes later, Dr. Hale entered Ethan's room, his white coat crisp, his voice smooth and distant. "Mrs. Rivers, I understand this is difficult," he began, "but your son's injuries are severe. His body's shutting down. It may be best to prepare yourself." I looked him straight in the eye. "Prepare for what?" He gave me that practiced look doctors use when they've rehearsed tragedy. "There's little chance he'll recover. The impact caused internal bleeding." "Internal bleeding?" I cut him off. "Are you sure?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Of course. The scans confirm it." I smiled thinly. "Then you won't mind if I get a second opinion." His jaw tensed. "You're free to do that, but I assure you—" I didn't let him finish. I left. My hands were trembling, but my mind was sharper than it had been in days. At home, I laid both test results side by side on the kitchen table, Lydia's copy and the hospital's digital printout. Different patient ID numbers, different blood types, different enzyme levels. One showed Ethan's blood type as A+, the other as O. My son was O+. I remembered because we'd spent hours donating blood together when he was younger, his first act of kindness at age 17. "If mine can save someone, I'll do it," he'd said, proud and fearless. But this was manipulation. Someone had falsified his records to make his condition look terminal. I felt my knees weaken. I sank into the chair, the papers trembling in my hands. There was no accident, no mistake. Someone wanted Ethan declared brain dead so they could pull the plug without question. And the only person who would benefit from his death was Daniel, my ex-husband, who once swore he'd never let me take Ethan when we divorced, who called me ungrateful for leaving when his gambling debts ruined us. A knock on the door jolted me back. I opened it to find Lydia soaked from the rain. "You can't stay home right now," she said breathlessly. "I think Dr. Hale suspects I've been helping you. He asked to see my shift logs." I pulled her inside. "Lydia, he's working with Daniel. I know it." She froze. "What makes you think that?" "Because I heard them," I whispered. "The night I arrived, Daniel said the words himself. Make it look like internal bleeding." Her eyes widened. "Then it's worse than I thought." She looked out the window before continuing, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There's a life insurance policy on your son's name. I overheard Dr. Hale mention a payout." The world tilted again. "A payout?" She nodded grimly. "Someone's paying him to falsify the death certificate." My vision blurred for a second, the edges of the world going white-hot with fury. My voice came out steady, colder than I expected. "Then we find proof." Lydia hesitated. "You'll be putting yourself in danger." "I'm already there," I said quietly. "They came for my son. Now I'm coming for the truth." That night, I slipped Ethan's medical file into my purse. I knew what I had to do next: dig into Daniel's finances, find the link, expose everything. But nothing could have prepared me for what I'd discover next, because the deeper I looked, the darker it got. And the man I once married wasn't just hiding secrets, he was hiding millions. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at the papers spread before me like puzzle pieces I couldn't quite fit together. Blood work discrepancies, insurance whispers, Daniel's shadow in every corner. I needed someone who could help me navigate this nightmare without tipping off the wrong people. That's when I thought of Mark Wallace, an old friend from my teaching days, a retired lawyer who had once helped me through the divorce. If anyone could uncover what Daniel was hiding, it was him. I dialed his number, my hand trembling slightly. He picked up on the third ring. "Joe, it's been years." "I need your help," I said quietly. "It's about Ethan." Within an hour, we were sitting across from each other in my small living room, rain tapping softly against the window. I showed him the test results, the altered files, and told him about Lydia's warning. I even told him what I'd overheard Daniel say that night. Mark leaned back, his brows furrowed deeply. "You're telling me your ex-husband may be paying a doctor to fake your son's death?" "Yes," I whispered, "and I think it's for money." He nodded slowly. "I'll look into Daniel's financials. If there's a life insurance policy involved, we'll find it." He left with a determined look while I sat staring at the rain again, realizing that sometimes the people who promise to protect you are the same ones who would rather see you buried under silence. By evening, my phone buzzed. It was Mark. His voice was tense. "Joanna, I found something." I froze. "What is it?" "There's an old corporate life insurance policy Daniel took out when he still owned Rivers Construction, one that lists Ethan as a beneficiary. But here's the thing. The beneficiary was changed 2 years ago to a private account held in Daniel's name. The payout is $3 million. $3 million. The room spun. My hand clutched the edge of the counter to steady myself. He changed it to himself?" "Yes," Mark said grimly, "but the policy still activates upon Ethan's death. If Ethan dies, Daniel gets everything. And because the company was never formally dissolved, the payout would look legal." I couldn't breathe. My son's life had a price tag. "I'm sending you the documents," Mark continued. "But Joanna, listen to me. If Daniel realizes you're digging into this, he won't stay quiet. Be careful." I hung up, numb. The phone slid from my hand, clattering to the floor. A few hours later, I returned to the hospital, walking straight into the cafeteria. The smell of burnt coffee and antiseptic filled the air. Daniel was there, sitting by the window, scrolling on his phone like he had every right to be. He looked up and smiled faintly when he saw me. "Joanna, you look terrible. How's Ethan?" My voice shook, but I forced myself to hold eye contact. Still fighting. Unlike some people, he doesn't give up easily. Daniel's expression hardened for a fraction of a second before softening again. "You always were dramatic." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "I know about the policy." For a moment, the mask cracked. His pupils widened. Then slowly, a smirk crept across his face. "You were always too curious for your own good." My throat tightened. "You're his father." He shrugged. "I was. Until you poisoned him against me. You took everything from me, my home, my business, my family. You think I'd let you walk away with all of it?" "You tried to kill him," I whispered, voice trembling with fury. His smile vanished. "You can't prove that." And with that, he stood, brushed invisible lint from his sleeve, and walked away, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself had weight. Later that night, Lydia found me in the corridor, pale and breathless. She held out a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a used syringe. "I found this in the disposal bin beside Ethan's bed," she said quietly. "It's not logged in the system. Whatever's in it, it wasn't prescribed." I stared at the bag, my mind racing. "That's proof. We test it." Lydia nodded. "But not through the hospital. They'll cover it up. I know a private lab that owes me a favor." I took the bag, holding it as if it were the most fragile, sacred thing in the world. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something stir inside me. Not fear, not grief, but a dangerous, steady kind of strength. "They wanted me to be silent," I said quietly. "They thought grief would keep me weak." Lydia looked at me with quiet awe. "What are you going to do?" I looked through the window at the rain-smeared parking lot where Daniel's car once sat. "I'm going to finish what they started," I said. "Only this time the truth will survive." That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of leaving Ethan alone in that room, with Dr. Hale's hands, Daniel's shadow, felt unbearable. So I stayed. I sat by his bedside, tracing the faint line of his pulse under the skin of his wrist. The machines hummed softly like a mechanical lullaby. His chest rose and fell, slow but steady. "Hey, baby," I whispered. "If you can hear me, you have to fight. Don't let them take this from you." Outside the window, the rain had stopped. The storm had passed, but inside me, another one had begun. Quiet, controlled, waiting. Hours passed. The nurses changed shifts again. The halls grew quiet. Around 3 a.m., the only sound left was the rhythmic beep of Ethan's heart monitor. I rested my head on the edge of his bed, whispering prayers I hadn't said in years. Then something changed. The beeping quickened, just a fraction. Then again. I lifted my head, my heart thudding. His fingers, the ones I'd been holding for hours, twitched. "Ethan?" My voice cracked. His eyelids fluttered, his lips parted, a soft groan escaping his throat. For the first time since the accident, there was movement, life. I pressed the call button, tears already spilling down my cheeks. "He's waking up! My son's waking up!" Lydia burst into the room moments later, eyes wide. She took one look at the monitor and gasped. "Oh my God! Mrs. Rivers, he's responding!" Ethan's fingers moved again, stronger this time. His breathing steadied, his heart rate normalized. It was like watching a light flicker back to life in a dark room. Lydia turned to me, whispering, "This isn't supposed to happen. They said his brain activity was flat." I smiled through tears. Maybe they were wrong, or maybe he just needed his mother. But the miracle didn't last long. The next morning, I returned from the cafeteria with coffee, only to find Ethan's bed empty. The monitors were still on, wires dangling, but my son was gone. I froze. My body went cold. "Where's my son?" I demanded. A nurse I didn't recognize looked up, startled. "He's been transferred." "Transferred?" I repeated. "To where?" She frowned, flipping through her clipboard. Private recovery wing, 3rd floor. At least that's what I was told. But something was off. The hospital didn't have a 3rd floor recovery wing. Panic clawed at my throat. I ran down the hallway, Lydia catching up from behind. "What's going on?" she asked, breathless. "They moved him," I said, nearly shouting. "But no one authorized it, no paperwork, no call. He's just gone." We checked every floor, every wing. Nothing. His name had vanished from the patient list at the nurses' station. Even his file, the paper one Lydia had hidden, was missing. It was like he'd been erased. Lydia's hands trembled as she typed into the hospital computer, searching the logs. "Wait." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "There's a deletion record. Someone removed Ethan's entry from the system 20 minutes ago." "Who?" She turned the monitor toward me. The name blinked on the screen. Dr. Hale. My vision blurred for a second, rage flooding through me like a wave. "He took him," I whispered. Lydia nodded grimly. "He must have transferred him off record. There's only one reason someone would do that, to finish what they started." We rushed to security. I demanded the CCTV footage from the ICU corridor. The guard hesitated but finally pulled it up. At 5:37 a.m., the grainy footage showed Dr. Hale and two orderlies wheeling a covered stretcher out the side door. The timestamp matched the deletion record. But there was more. In the corner of the frame, just barely visible in the reflection of a parked car window, a face I recognized. Daniel. He was standing by his black sedan, hands in his pockets, watching. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Lydia gripped my arm. "We have to call the police." I shook my head. "Not yet. If I go through official channels, they'll cover it up. They have money, influence. I need proof. Undeniable proof." Lydia hesitated, then nodded. "Then we start with the one person who might help. The man who wrote that insurance policy." Her plan made sense. We'd track the paperwork trail, find where the money was supposed to go, and use it to expose them both. But before we could move, a voice echoed from behind us. "Mrs. Rivers." I turned. And there stood Dr. Hale, his expression calm, almost amused. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Lydia stiffened beside me, and I realized something then. His hands were trembling slightly, but his eyes were ice. The kind of calm that only comes from people who believe they're untouchable. "You have no idea what you've done," he said. "You're interfering in matters you don't understand." I took a step forward. "The only thing I understand," I said, through clenched teeth, "is that you took my son, and I will find him." His lips curved into a slow, sinister smile. "Then I'll pray you find him before it's too late." He turned and walked away, leaving behind the faint smell of antiseptic and something darker. That was the moment I knew the fight had just changed. It was no longer about survival. It was war. The next 48 hours were a blur of phone calls, dead ends, and fear so thick it felt like breathing through smoke. Ethan was gone, and no police officer wanted to hear from a hysterical mother. "He's an adult, ma'am," one officer said over the phone, his tone flat. "Maybe he was transferred for specialist care." "Without my consent? Without a single form signed?" I snapped. "You think that's protocol?" He sighed. "We'll file a report." That's what they always say when they don't plan to do anything. I hung up and stood there in my kitchen, shaking. Every light was off except the one above the sink. My reflection in the window looked older, harder. I barely recognized her. That was when my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. "He's still alive. Don't call the police. Watch your back." No name, no location, just those words. My heart dropped. I showed it to Lydia when we met behind the hospital loading dock an hour later. She stared at the screen, pale. "That's not Hale," she whispered. "He wouldn't warn you." "Then who?" Before she could answer, a small car pulled up. Mark stepped out, clutching a folder. His expression was grim. "I traced Daniel's accounts," he said, glancing around before lowering his voice. "He wired a large sum, $500,000, to a private care facility outside town. It's under an alias, but I recognize the registration number." "Where?" I demanded. "His lake house," Mark said. "He's hiding Ethan there." The air left my lungs. That house, secluded, surrounded by woods, miles from the nearest neighbor. A place Daniel always called his sanctuary. "Call the police," Lydia urged. I shook my head. "No. If they move too soon, Daniel will vanish before they get there. I'm going first." Lydia's eyes filled with alarm. "Joanna." "I'm not asking for permission," I said softly. "That's my child in there." The drive out to the lake was long and silent. The roads wound through dark pine forests, the headlights cutting through mist like blades. Every sound, every creak of the car, every whisper of rain made my pulse quicken. When I finally saw the gate, I turned off my headlights and coasted the last few hundred feet. The house loomed beyond the trees, pale in the moonlight, windows glowing faintly. I slipped through the side gate, heart hammering. The gravel crunched under my shoes. Somewhere inside, a generator hummed. The front door was locked, but one of the back windows was cracked open. Careless, just enough. I slid it upward and climbed in. The smell hit me first. Antiseptic, faintly metallic. A low rhythmic beeping came from down the hall. I followed it. And there he was. Ethan lay in a narrow hospital bed, IV lines still running into his arm, monitors blinking softly beside him. His hair was damp, his face pale, but he was breathing. My knees gave out. I pressed a trembling hand to his cheek. "Oh my God, Ethan." Then a voice behind me said, "You weren't supposed to find this place." I turned. Daniel stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, eyes cold. Behind him, Dr. Hale hovered like a ghost, holding a syringe. "You did this," I said, my voice shaking. Daniel sighed. "You always make things difficult, Joanna. You could have just let him go peacefully. I wasn't going to let him suffer." "Suffer?" I took a step forward. "You mean you weren't going to let him testify? You weren't going to let the insurance company find out you forged the documents?" His jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do." Lydia's voice suddenly echoed from behind him, strong, clear, furious. "No, Daniel, you did what cowards do." He spun around, startled. She'd followed me, holding her phone up, recording. "Everything's on camera," she said. "You just confessed." Dr. Hale panicked, dropping the syringe. Daniel lunged toward Lydia, but I was faster. I grabbed the nearest thing I could and a metal IV pole and swung. The sound of metal meeting bone cracked through the air. Daniel staggered back, clutching his shoulder. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed through the window. Lydia had called them anyway. When the police burst in, Daniel tried to speak, but the words fell apart in his mouth. Dr. Hale raised his hands, trembling, muttering something about just following orders. I stood between them and my son, shaking but unbroken. The officers cuffed them both. Daniel glared at me as they dragged him out, hatred burning in his eyes. "You'll regret this, Joanna." I met his stare with steel. "No, you will." As the door slammed behind them, I finally exhaled, a sound somewhere between a sob and a prayer. Lydia rested a hand on my shoulder. "He's safe now," she whispered. I turned to Ethan. His breathing was steady, peaceful. For the first time in days, I let myself believe he might really live. "Safe," I echoed, though my voice trembled. "But it's not over yet. I want every lie they told brought into the light." Lydia nodded. "Then we'll start tomorrow. Together." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something warm, fragile, but real, rise inside me. Hope. The trial was short, but the silence afterward stretched for months. Dr. Hale confessed first, his voice trembling as he told the court how Daniel had offered him a retirement fund in exchange for falsified reports and quiet cooperation. The syringe Lydia found held a high-dose sedative, enough to stop a weak heart if administered incorrectly. Daniel never once looked at me during sentencing. He kept his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the wall as if none of this had anything to do with him. But when the judge said 25 years without parole, I finally saw it. The flicker of fear in the eyes of a man who'd spent his whole life believing money could buy silence. Afterward, I went to see Ethan. He was awake now, frail but stronger, sitting by the window of his rehab room. His hair had grown back a little. The light from the afternoon sun framed his face, and for the first time since that night, I saw color in his cheeks. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "I heard what you did." I smiled, but my throat tightened. "You heard a lot of lies before. It's time you heard the truth." He reached out, his hand shaking slightly as it closed around mine. "You never stopped fighting for me." I looked at him through tears. A mother doesn't stop, not when there's breath left to fight with. He smiled faintly. Then we both made it back. The words stayed with me long after I left that day. A few weeks later, Lydia came to see me. She'd been suspended from her job for breach of confidentiality, but she didn't seem bitter. If anything, she looked lighter. "I'd do it again," she said. "Some people in this place forgot what it means to care." I hugged her tightly. "You saved us." She smiled. "No, Mrs. Rivers, you saved yourself. I just reminded you how strong you already were." That night, I went home and sat in Ethan's old room, the one I hadn't entered since the accident. His sketches still lined the walls. The smell of graphite and old paper filled the air. On the desk sat a half-finished drawing, the lake house framed by trees. It felt like a scar frozen in ink, but instead of pain, I felt peace. Months passed. Ethan walked again, slowly, carefully, with the same determination he'd always had. We moved into a small home near the water, different lake, gentler memories. I started painting again, the first strokes shaky but healing. Every morning, light spilled through the windows like a quiet blessing. Sometimes I'd catch Ethan standing by the porch, watching the horizon. He still had nightmares about the crash, about his father, but each time he woke to find me there, and that was enough. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he said, "Mom, you ever think about forgiving him?" I looked at the reflection of the lake, gold and endless. "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word," I said, "but I've let him go. That's what he can't take from me anymore." He nodded, understanding more than I thought he could. There are nights I still dream of that hospital. The blinking, lights, the nurse's whisper, the cold smell of antiseptic. I dream of the moment I hid behind that door, too afraid to breathe, and the sound of my ex-husband's voice sealing his own fate. But I don't wake in fear anymore. I wake with purpose. Because that night didn't just teach me how cruel people can be. It taught me how powerful truth is when you refuse to let it die. Sometimes the strongest love isn't the one that comforts. It's the one that fights back, that claws through the dark until it finds light again. So if you're watching this right now, wherever you are, maybe you've been betrayed by someone you trusted or silenced by people who thought they could erase you. I want you to know something. You are not powerless. Love, real love, doesn't hide. It protects, it endures, it fights. And that night in the hospital, when I thought I'd lost everything, I realized something I'll never forget. A mother's strength can outlive any lie. If you've ever fought for someone who couldn't fight for themselves, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. You're not alone.